All right, I think we're live. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Tiffany. I'm planetarium lecturer at Beecher Planetarium, and welcome to our online planetarium show. This is the first time that we've ever done this, and we have no clue what we're doing. Okay, so bear with us. um, I wanted to introduce you to the whole crew. The whole Ward Beecher crew is out here tonight to talk with you a little bit about astronomy. We have our planetarium engineer, Curt Spivey.
Hey, everybody.
We also have our planetarium director, Dr. Patrick Durell.
How's it going, eh?
And we have our students. We have Eleni.
Hello.
And Howard.
Hi.
And Jenny.
Hello.
Hey guys. It's great to have you guys all out today. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little star talk using an open source free software that I've always loved, but I've really come to enjoy it a lot more recently. And please feel free to ask questions at any time. Just comment on Facebook, and our students here will be moderating. So if you have any questions, they'll relay them back to us. I won't be able to watch the whole stream while I'm chatting, but they'll relay, either they'll talk to you in the comments or they'll relay them to me, and we'll have some great discussion. I think it might be clear at least part of the night tonight, so I hope maybe after we learn a little bit about what we can see in our backyards tonight, we can go out and look up and share the sky together. So without further ado, let me share my screen and we'll get started with the nighttime sky. All right, so this is a software called Stellarium, and I'll have the students send a link, and we'll make sure to have a link in our description for this software because it's completely free and it's open source, and it's I've used it for years and I've loved it for years, but it's just really, really wonderful. It's a virtual planetarium, so you can have a planetarium literally in your pocket, on your cell phone, on your laptop, or on your computer. And that's what we're going to use here tonight to talk a little bit about our current nighttime sky. So I have our sky set for tonight about 9 o'clock. The skies are over Youngstown. Now, if you live a little bit outside of Youngstown, the skies aren't going to change too much, but I like to say your backyard because you really can just go outside and see these stars. We're facing north because we have to start with a very famous group of stars. If you guys have been to my planetarium shows before, I love to talk about this group of stars. 7 bright stars right here in a line, right here in the sky, in the high northeastern sky. This makes the shape of a big spoon in the sky. This is our Big Dipper. So let's see. There we go. That's our Big Dipper. It's inside of a larger group of stars, a larger constellation called Ursa Major, the Big Bear. But you can see the brightest stars of Ursa Major make this big spoon in the sky. So we often call it Ursa, or the Big Dipper. Okay. The Big Dipper, also these 2 stars here on the edge of the cup. If you draw a line down through these stars, they will point you to a very special star here. That star is called Polaris. And that is in the constellation Ursa Minor, or the Little Bear, which also looks a little like a spoon. It's the Little Dipper as well. Just like 7 bright stars make up our big spoon in the sky, 7 not as bright stars make up our little spoon in the sky. You can see that the stars that make up our Little Dipper are not, most of them are not very bright at all. In fact, some people call this the dark sky marker, because if you can count all 7 stars in the Little Dipper, then you have really good dark skies. And that's kind of hard to find in Ohio, but in Stellarium, it's really easy. You press one little button and you can get rid of the atmosphere, and you can see the beautiful Milky Way. You can see the 7 stars in the Little Dipper very, very clearly. Now, for those of you who don't know Polaris, you may not know it by that name, but if you look closely, Polaris points you exactly north. That's because it's also known as the North Star. It's great. It's it's like your night sky marker. It helps you figure out where north is because it always points you exactly north. Now, I'm really kind of hoping that it is clear at least a little bit tonight, because if it is, I'm going to pull out my telescope and I'm going to point it west. Let's turn west here. There is something really cool going on in the western sky. Okay, if you see that one of the brightest objects in our whole nighttime sky right now is the planet Venus. And it's in your western sky right as the sun is going down. And it's it's right now, it's in the constellation Taurus the Bull. Okay, so this is his face, the face of the bull. These are his horns up here. This bright star Aldebaran here that I'm highlighting, it's a red-orange star in the sky, and it's his eye. Aldebaran actually does translate to eye of the bull. Now, on the back of Taurus is this cluster of stars called the Pleiades. The neat thing about Stellarium is that this software, you don't just have to stay here on Earth. You can also, it can show you what the sky looks like if you're just looking up in the sky with no binoculars or telescopes. You're just using your eyes and you're just enjoying the view. But you can also very easily just zoom in. I'm going to get rid of this here. We can see that Venus is incredibly close to this star cluster here called the Pleiades. These stars just live physically close together in space. And people who take pictures of the sky love this part of the sky because it is beautiful to look at through a telescope. So if you do have a telescope, I recommend looking this way because Venus is so close to the Pleiades right now that you can actually get them both in a telescope. If you look through a telescope, you could see them both. And if you look at Venus real up close at a telescope, it would look something like this. This might look a little unusual to you. Were you expecting Venus to have a phase? It kind of reminds me of our moon, right? We actually see Venus as phases. So sometimes it looks like a little crescent, sometimes it looks bigger. This sort of looks like we can only see half of Venus, roughly. So that's what it would look like through a telescope tonight. This is a special astronomical event that's happening. We call this a planetary conjunction. That's just a bunch of syllables which means that a planet is really, really close to something really, really cool in our sky. In this case, the Pleiades. So Venus will be very close to the Pleiades here for the next few days. Okay. Now, one thing I did forget to mention, we don't have any questions yet. One thing I did forget to mention back in the north sky, I'm going to go back real quick because you can't see it. You do have to have, again, a telescope for this one. But I'm going to highlight, let's see, can you find our Big Dipper? I'm not seeing it. That's because we're a little too zoomed in. It's really high in our sky this time of year. It's high in the northeast. To look almost directly overhead. Okay. But here, I'll just do we can do these all. That's fine. We have Ursa Major here. And this tiny little constellation we very rarely talk about because it's just so faint and not really very interesting in shape. But this is Ursa Major, our big bear, and this is Camelopardalis, and kind of above our bear's nose, between these constellations, in this part of the sky, you will find a comet right now. There's Comet Atlas. If you read astronomy news, you may have heard of this one. It's really exciting because we think it could be really, really, really bright. Comets are hard to predict, but we think it could end up being so bright you could see it with the unaided eye. That would be pretty cool. Eleni, we have a question?
Yes, Denise Kelly asked, in which direction in the sky is Venus tonight?
Oh, Venus is over in our western sky. So look, even if the sun is still setting and it's not completely dark, you can see all those beautiful sunset colors. If you look up in the western part of the sky, you'll see this really bright object. That's Venus. You can actually see it before it even gets dark. It's really cool. It's been over there in the western sky for a while now. It's beautiful to look at. It's one of my favorite things to see in the sky. Okay, so so this Comet Atlas, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but right now we're excited about it because it's gotten 6,000 times brighter than it was 2 months ago. So in just 2 short months, it's gotten incredibly bright. And we think by the end of May, when it gets really close to the sun and a little closer to us, that it could get so bright we could see it even if you were in a big city with lots of light pollution. Maybe, maybe not. It kind of depends. If the comet broke up or something like that and started to dissipate quicker than we expected, it might not. Comets, I guess my favorite quote about comets are, they're a lot like cats. They have tails and you can't predict what they're gonna do. Jenny, we have a question?
Somebody is asking, Perry Powell is asking, how often have we ever seen comets?
How often? Well, comets happen quite often, but a comet that's bright enough to see in our sky, especially without a telescope or binoculars, that hasn't happened for quite a while. I can't remember it happening since the 90s. Pat, do you know if it's happened sooner than that?
Well, the last 2 bright ones that we could see in Youngstown were in the 1996 and 1997, Comet Hale-Opp and Comet Hyakutake.
That's
There
what
has
I
been a
thought too.
couple since then, but they're visible in the south. So we're due for a bright one.
Yeah, it would be great to see something bright in the sky right now. It would be really, really neat. So we can look forward to that part of the sky and see if maybe, I think you can see it pretty easily right now through, depending on the kind of telescope you have. If you have one, you can see it, but it'll get brighter hopefully the next few months. Okay, so here's Venus over here again in the western sky, right by that Pleiades, a beautiful planetary conjunction. Get rid of some of these labels so they're not so cluttered. I want to spend just a couple minutes in our southwestern sky, because if you notice, wow, there's just a lot of bright stars over here, right? In fact, if you connect the brightest of the stars together, they make this sort of oval shape or circle shape in the sky. It's sometimes called the winter circle. This is sort of our wintertime sky. It's not winter, it is getting warmer, thank goodness. But that's why it's over in the west. It's not, our wintertime sky is still up, but it's only up shortly after the sun sets. This is about 9 p.m. So these wintertime constellations will start to set by 10:30 or so right now, and they'll start to set earlier and earlier each night, by about 4 minutes or so, until they're gone, and we won't get to see them again till next year. Okay, so one of the groups of stars I wanted to share with you, you guys probably recognize this one. 3 bright stars in a line make his belt. This is a constellation Orion. I still can't get the, here. There we go, I got it. This is our famous hunter in the sky. He, Betelgeuse in his arm or his shoulder or his armpit, depending on how you want to look at it. Betelgeuse has been in the astronomy news a lot lately because it very rapidly dimmed out of nowhere, and we weren't expecting that. And stars don't just wink out almost without us knowing about it. So this is not something that happens very commonly, at least not so much that you can see it with your eyes. Betelgeuse got like a third dimmer than it normally was, but it's starting to brighten back up. We know that something's going on with this star. We're still trying to figure out exactly what, but we do know that it's at the end of its life. And when it does die, it'll die in a massive supernova explosion that will light up our sky for months. But the chances of it happening in our lifetime is pretty low. So Don't hold your breath for Betelgeuse, but it is fun to look at even now. Orion was a famous hunter in Greek mythology. He also had 2 hunting dogs, Sirius and Procyon. Okay, so Sirius, the big dog, and Procyon, the little dog. Does not look like a hunting dog to me. It looks more like a hot dog to me. But now, one of the neat things that I get to do with Stellarium that I don't always get to do in the planetarium, I get to show you some of these sort of obscure constellations. So this constellation here is one of my favorites, but it's hard to draw, and it's really abstract. I'll be nice and just say it's abstract. It's called Monoceros, and I'm curious. Can anyone guess what it is? An animal. I'll give you that hint. So this is an animal constellation. Can anyone guess without using Google? What animal is that? Do we have any guesses? I'm not looking at the chat at all. Do we have some?
We are not getting any guesses.
No guesses, guys.
Yeah, come on, guys.
What animal do you think Monoceros is? A horse. David says a horse. Horse. I like that. Anyone else? Any other guesses?
We got rhino, scorpion, giraffe, zebra.
Giraffe, scorpion. Okay, I got rhino.
Lots
Yeah,
of giraffes.
like a
Lobster?
monoceros. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I will show you. It is a unicorn. Yeah, a unicorn in outer space. Pretty cool. And Canis Minor is sort of riding on his back there. So this is our southwestern sky. Like I said, the wintertime constellations are just beautiful. You can see our Milky Way galaxy cuts right into our wintertime sky, meaning there are really literally more stars in that part of the sky. And there's many bright ones, colorful, beautiful stars. So it's a wonderful sky to see, but man, wintertime is kind of tough to go hang out outside and look at stars. So I actually think this time of year, right before we lose these stars, is a great time to go see them because it's a little bit warmer, it's a little less miserable to be outside, and you can really appreciate them before we lose them for a few months. So our stars do change with the seasons. I'm not going to spend too much time with the springtime sky. I hope to do that in future programs, but I want to share with you a little bit over in our southeastern sky. Although I did see Charles on, so I feel like I need to do my Arcturus thing. The brightest thing in our sky right now is our moon. In our sky, it looks a little more like this. Have you ever looked up at the moon and you're like, wow, it's just so beautiful. I have to take a picture of it. And you pull out your phone and you take a picture and you think it's going to be amazing. And it's just this tiny little dot. You're really disappointed. Yeah, I've done that too. But if you did stick your phone up on a telescope, on an eyepiece on a telescope, they even have little mounts that let you do this. You would get a really nice picture, something like this. Okay. Our moon phase tonight is a waxing gibbous moon, so we're going towards a full moon. You can see a piece of the moon here is in shadow. When you zoom up, you can really tell that this is a full round moon, but we're just missing part of it because sunlight is shining here, and this just tiny crescent sliver is in shadow. The moon is still one of my favorite things to look at through binoculars or a telescope. Even if you have toy binoculars, the moon is still pretty cool to look at through them. You can see this really beautiful, like reddish color here. It's a shadow, so you can see this rich shadow colors right there And sometimes you can see shadows that the craters are making. You can kind of see it here. You can see shadows with the craters on the moon. It's beautiful. So if you do have anything that like a telescope or binoculars you can look at, look through, go look at the moon. It's so fun. It seems simple, but it's beautiful. I never get tired of looking at it. And the moon right now is in one of my favorite constellations. So I'm going to pan down here a little bit. We're in the southeastern sky. Okay, you see this bright star here, Regulus. That's the heart of Leo the Lion. Okay, so Leo the Lion here, this is his mane, his head, his body here, and his tail. Okay, I can show you some artwork there. They were gracious enough to draw him legs. So we can see Leo. I really enjoy looking right behind Leo. There's this head of hair. It's called Coma Berenices. It's just a cluster of stars, and a lot of them are really faint, so you can't see it unless you have really nice dark skies. I don't see them too often from my backyard, but it's one of my favorite constellations too. It's Leo and Coma Berenices right there. Okay, so this is just I just wanted to do a brief star talk here, and I gotta say it feels really good to talk some stars with you guys and to just share the evening with you. You know, one of the reasons why I've always loved astronomy is that the stars connect us. They connect us across cultures, across the world, across languages, and even across this pandemic. We still share the same stars, and we can still connect with one another through the stars. So thanks for sharing the evening with us. But we're not done yet. I'm going to switch it over here in just a moment to our engineer, Curt Spivey. He's going to talk a little bit about telescopes, some telescope basics, some things you might want to learn, especially if you're shopping for a telescope. So Curt, you want to take it away?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Tiffany was talking lots about seeing things in telescopes. And while we are trapped in our houses, that doesn't mean we can't get out in our yards. And it is a great time to be a backyard astronomer. Now, when you get to be a serious amateur astronomer, there is a running joke. Most normal people buy cars, and astronomers buy telescopes. And that can be true, can be, it depends on what level you're going to do. So I'm going to talk about the different types of telescopes and try to help you out to match up a scope for your skill level and your interest as we go through here. There are three basic types of telescopes. The first kind I do not have on display here. It's called a refractor telescope. That's the original telescope. The original telescopes were just like those spy glasses you see in the old pirate movies with a lens on each end, and they'd slide it in and out to focus it. That is a refracting telescope. They still make refracting telescopes. Those are very good for seeing detail of objects like the moon, like Saturn, objects that are close by. Refracting telescopes show a lot of detail. However, when you have lenses, you get something known as spherical aberration. So the bigger the lenses get, you get this warping around the edges. The two telescopes you see here are, this one here is my personal telescope. Unfortunately, I've had it for about 20 years, and this was state-of-the-art for astronomers, amateur astronomers in the 1960s and 70s. So to quote a famous movie character, she might not look like Munch Kid, but she's got it where it counts. This is called a reflecting telescope. Sir Isaac Newton came up with this basic design over 350 years ago. And the way it works is, if you look down the barrel there, you see at the back of the telescope, back here by me, there is a 6-inch mirror. The light comes in this way and bounces off that mirror up to a second mirror that's right here at this cage at the front that we call the diagonal, and that sends it out to the eyepiece. This design is so elegant. This is basically what Sir Isaac Newton designed 350 years ago. It's so elegant, we still use the same basic design. Things have changed with materials and things like that. I'll get to that in just a moment. But when you're talking telescopes, Something to avoid. I do not recommend you go to Walmart and pick one of those little scopes up for 25 to 50 bucks. Especially if a telescope talks about what kind of magnification it can do. That is a warning sign. They're just trying to bamboozle you with big words. You don't want to do that, because all magnification is controlled by this, the eyepiece. Depending on what size eyepiece you put in your telescope, that's what controls the magnification. So when you're buying a telescope, the thing to remember is the bigger the telescope is, the more light it can gather, the more you're going to see. Now, this, like I said, was state-of-the-art in the late 60s, early 70s. I actually cobbled this one together from 3 that were broken, so I call it my Frankenstein telescope. It's what we call an F9. You see how long the tube is. The reason the tube has to be that long is after the light bounces off this mirror, the light must focus right where the diagonal is up at this end. And for this particular curve of the mirror down here, it takes this entire distance to do that. Now, for the longest time, this was the only design there was for a mirror telescope. And some of these things, the bigger the mirror they got, the longer the tubes got. And sometimes there were some astronomers in the late 1700s, early 1800s that had 2-story tall telescopes. They had to climb up on these ladder systems to look through the eyepiece because the mirror was so big down at the other end. Well, in the 20th century, we've come up with some solutions to that, and that goes to this guy over here. So this is a Volkswagen Beetle. This is a Ferrari over here. This is one of our telescopes from the Beecher Planetarium that we have thanks to the generous donation of one of our sponsors. He donated money for us to get this telescope. This, I'm going to turn it so you can see the mirror, has an 8-inch mirror inside there. You can see, if I can get this turned just right, there we go. It's got a much bigger mirror on the inside than this one. But look at the tube. It's way shorter. This is what we call a compound telescope. This particular style of telescope is called a Schmidt Cassegrain telescope. You know, pardon my clock here. It's going to bong behind me. This has the big mirror back here. Its secondary mirror is up here. The light focuses to that, but it's not going to be in focus. So behind the primary mirror, there's a series of lenses that then focus the light to the eyepiece here at the back. So you can use a much shorter tube. Most modern telescopes use some variation of a compound telescope. This one's called a Schmidt Cassegrain. There's a Ritchie-Chrétien out there, things like that. But that's not the only thing that makes this superior over my telescope. Down here you can see the bottom of my telescope. This is what we call an equatorial mount, German equatorial mount. Basically, this piece right here, if I line this up with the North Pole, it has a motor right here that clocks in the the exact opposite speed of the Earth's speed. So if I have this thing lined up correctly, once I put it on an object, this motor will keep that on that object as it moves across the sky. You don't realize how fast the stuff in the sky moves until you're trying to keep it in a telescope. The other thing you'll notice is how hefty this mount is. A lot of the low-end telescopes have very flimsy mounts to them, and somebody takes a step next to your telescope, your image is going to go blah, 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 in the eyepiece because the mount is flimsy. So you want a nice sturdy mount like this too. That's one way to do it. Modern days we do it another way. This telescope is called the Celestron Evolution. In the base right here is a lithium-ion rechargeable battery, and in the tower back here behind the telescope is a motor. Oh, wrong way. So because it has a computer in here, if I line the telescope up with the stars, it has a 3-star alignment system, I can then tell it I want to see this object and hit a button, and it'll just go whir, click, and put you right on that object. This is called a go-to telescope, and these are very popular these days. and a great way to take the frustration factor out of looking at the nighttime sky. The other cool thing about this particular telescope is I can also run this from my cell phone. There's an app I can get. It's got its own built-in Wi-Fi. All I got to do is connect my cell phone to the telescope, and I can actually run the telescope through my app instead of the remote here. It's actually a very elegant system. Now, you can't get this kind of telescope anymore. The company that made this Criterion went out of business a long, long time ago in the mid-'80s. When I mentioned most normal people buy cars, this telescope does cost about what a pretty good used car would cost. This is around a $3,000 telescope over here. You do have options though. The things to remember when you're looking at a telescope is the bigger around it is, the more light it's going to gather, the more you're going to see. You can actually get telescopes that are this exact size right over here, a 6-inch mirror with a tube this long with a really simple mount called a Dobsonian mount. It's basically a swivel pad on the bottom and a pivot point, so you can just move it by hand and put it on an object. Now, it doesn't have motors. You're going to have to move it yourself to keep it on an object, but they're very easy to do. You can actually get a telescope with the same light gathering ability as this guy right here for as little as $300. A company called Skywatcher makes 6-inch telescopes that are that size. By the way, if you have any questions about telescope, just put them in the comments. They'll pop them up and let me know. I'll be happy to answer them as we go through. So you have a wide range. The other thing besides the telescope you want to look for is the eyepiece. Most low-end telescopes have these really cheap little eyepieces, and they're very frustrating because they have such a narrow field of view, you can't keep things in that. When you look at a telescope, this one that I'm holding is a 40 millimeter, so it's got a very wide field of view. The smaller your millimeter diameter, the tighter the view and the more magnification you're going to get. So this one that I have in my telescope is what's called a Plössl lens. These are very good. You can get them from anywhere from 25 to 50 bucks. Now, the other thing you don't want to do is get a cheap telescope and then a really good eyepiece, because you're wasting the eyepiece on it too. Now, you'll notice I do wear glasses. It's hard for me to look through an eyepiece like this with my glasses because it is a narrow field of view. I usually take it off. That's okay if you're observing by yourself, because basically the telescope is a really big eyeglass that you can use to look at the nighttime sky, and you can adjust it for your own focus. But if you're doing a group, a star party we call them, that means you're constantly adjusting the focus of the telescope to adapt to everybody's eyes. So there are new eyepieces out there, and I'm going to turn this one around.
Sure, we have a question.
Okay, what's the question?
Where's the best place to buy a good telescope, and what is a good brand for eyepieces? So 2 questions.
Okay. Well, very good. There are a couple of online companies. The local camera shops like YM do carry a few, but they don't have much of a selection, and because they don't have much variety, the prices aren't all that way down. There are a couple of very good online vendors. One company is called Orion Telescopes, just like the constellation. Their website is really easy to remember, telescopes.com. They have their own brands. They carry Celestron, and I believe they're now carrying the Skywatcher telescopes too. I'm not 100% sure. Skywatcher is another great company they have online. We at YSU use a company out of Philadelphia called Skies Unlimited. We like them because not only do they sell us high quality telescopes like the Celestron here, when we have a problem with it, you can get them on the horn. They can talk you through it, or if it's something really bad, our solar scope, our hydrogen alpha scope that we get out when the sun's actually active, they've actually repaired our drive motors on that and fixed it from the wear that we put on it because of using it. So Skies Unlimited, Orion Telescopes, Skywatcher, really good telescopes. Eyepieces I'll get to here. This particular eyepiece is a really good one. We call these things soda cans. You can see how huge this eyepiece is. That thing weighs about 5 pounds. It's something else. When you got a telescope like this, you have to worry about balance. If I were to put an eyepiece like this in this, my end of my telescope would immediately go. So this telescope is designed to hold these sort of things. This is a 20 millimeter, so it is half the size of this, but it's got this really wide eye relief, so I can actually use this with my glasses and still see objects in it too. Now, this particular eyepiece is about 125, 150 bucks. So if you're getting a $300 telescope, it doesn't make a lot of sense to get an eyepiece like this. If you go to some place like Skies Unlimited to talk telescopes, you can say you want to get some eyepiece. They can give you a range. There is a variety of eyepiece called a super Plossl, P-L-O umlaut S-L-L-L. It's a German name. The company that made them, Plossl, is one of the leaders, but everybody uses their design now. A super Plossl gives you the wide eye relief, but the eyepieces are still small enough they work on most telescopes. You do want to get a variety. Like I said, I've got a 40 millimeter here. This is for a wider view of the sky. The reason you want it wide is once you get, it helps you line up the object in there, and you make sure it's in the center. Then you can swap out that eyepiece for another one. This one's a 20 millimeter. I usually try to keep a 30 or a 40 handy. Then a 20 will let you see some detail. Then if you want to see something a little bit more, you can go a little bit smaller. This is another fantastic eyepiece right here. This is a really good high quality one. The highest quality eyepieces are called Maglars. They cost about what telescopes do because they're so good. But this is a 14 millimeter. Then the smaller you go down, I usually don't go down below a 12 millimeter or a 10 millimeter because the field narrows so much you really lose a lot because you're constantly trying to keep the object in there. So you want to get a variety of sizes. You want a large, a medium, and a small. And then you want to match your eyepieces to your budget. Super Plossls are really good. If you're getting a really high-end telescope, you can go for the more higher-end eyepieces as well. Now, say you're just getting started in the field. I do recommend the Dobsonians. I'm sure Dr. Durell will talk about this too. He has been observing since he was young, and a great way to learn the nighttime sky is if you manually have to get things there, then you start learning, oh, that's that object I'm looking at, stuff like that. He's way better at that than I am. I didn't actually start looking at the nighttime sky in earnest until I was in college. So he's really got a good eye for the nighttime sky because of that. But say you're just getting started and you don't know if you're going to really like looking at the nighttime sky through a telescope. If you get a really expensive telescope and you get frustrated because it's hard to use, you're going to end up with the world's most expensive coat hanger in your house if you do that. A good way to start, if you're not quite sure, is a good pair of binoculars. Now, this particular pair is ancient. It was actually my grandfather's pair of binoculars. These are what we call field glasses here. But these are like a refracting telescope. You have two numbers on them. It's a small number by a large number with an X in between. The small number is the diameter on this side of the telescope. The large number is the diameter on this side of the telescope. And the bigger, just like with the telescopes, the bigger you get this size, the more you can see. Now, the problem with binoculars is you're looking around the nighttime sky. If you're just holding them and you're looking up at the sky, they move all around and it's really hard to keep objects in. Most binoculars that you can get, and I know YM Camera has a good selection of binoculars here in Youngstown, but also Skies Unlimited has a great direction as well. But they have a little screw hole on the back these days, and you can, for like 20 bucks, buy an L bracket that will allow you to mount your binoculars to a camera tripod. Then all you got to do is get it on the object, and the camera tripod keeps it from bouncing around. These give you a much wider view of the nighttime sky than a telescope will. Telescope will give you more detail. This will give you a much wider view. Tiffany was talking about Venus and the Pleiades in the nighttime sky. Binoculars are a fantastic way to look at those two objects at the same time. So I do recommend, if you're just getting started looking at the nighttime sky, a good pair of binoculars is a good way to go, and you can get a really powerful pair of binoculars for around $100. So it is a good way to get started with the nighttime sky. So once again, the things you want to remember when you're getting a telescope: don't go for the cheap department store telescopes. You'll be horribly disappointed and you won't see a whole lot. The bigger around a telescope is, the more light it can gather, the more you're going to see. For bang for your buck, what you want is a Dobsonian mount telescope. Skywatcher, the company, makes a bunch of different varieties, and you can get a telescope this size in a Skywatcher Dobsonian for around $300. You can also get one bigger than this, more light gathering ability than we have on our big telescope, for around $600. You can get a 10-inch mirror for around $600. So all sorts of options out there. It sounds like such a simple question as to what sort of telescope I should buy, but you need to know what sort of light conditions you have. You got a lot of lights around. It doesn't matter how powerful your telescope, you're not going to see a whole lot. If you you need to know what you want to look for. Are you a planet hunter? Do you like to look for deep sky objects? People like Skies Unlimited can help you with that, and so can Orion. They have a great looking for a telescope so they can match up your budget with what you want to see with your light conditions, so you can see everything there is. So that's all for telescopes. There's always a lot more, but I intend to, I noticed as soon as I set this guy up inside, it decided to cloud up outside here in Austin town. So that's just my luck. But hopefully while I'm stuck here in the house, I'll be able to get this guy out and take a look at the nighttime sky. So if you have any other questions, it looks like there is one there, Eleni. Go ahead.
Yes, someone would like to know if you have a recommendation on binoculars. What are some binoculars?
Brand-wise, no. But these binoculars that I have here, these are on the small side. They're 7 by 35. So 35 is not very big here. For looking at the nighttime sky, I try to get a 50 on this end. And the size on this side is really depending on how you want to, if you want to look through glasses, you want to get bigger on this side. 10 by 50s are good. 10 by 100s are awesome. And you can get a 10 by 100 pair of binoculars for around $150, plus the mount. You probably already have a camera tripod around. You can see a lot of stuff there. Oh, and the clock tells me I've been talking for 15 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer at the end. But for now, I'm going to turn you back over to Tiffany.
Thank you, Curt. I love watching him geek out about telescopes. It's great. And so whatever your budget is, if it's $100, maybe you can get some great binoculars. If it's $3,000, you can get a telescope that connects to your phone. And if you have a budget of $1 billion, then Dr. Patrick Durell here is going to talk to you about what those options would be.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I get to finish off the show, but yeah, we're going to sort of take things up into space. This is a very special month for those of us who are professional astronomers as well, is because this month marks the 30th anniversary of the launching of the Hubble Space Telescope. This is one of the most successful scientific instruments in all of history, and it's just provided us with such stunning images over its 30 years. It's a big milestone, and we're hoping to get a few more years out of it. So what I wanted to do is just show a few images just to sort of, highlight. I'm sure a number of people out there have seen pictures either on the Hubble Space Telescope website itself, or have seen stuff posted on Facebook, people saying, oh, I just saw this really cool image. But all the wonderful things about the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, the Hubble Telescope itself, to carry on from what Curt was saying, is a reflecting telescope. Now, it's got a mirror instead of 6 or 10 or 12 inches across. It's got a mirror 2.4 meters across, which makes it a medium-sized telescope. But what's important is that it's in orbit. And that allows us the ability to see things with much sharper, okay, much sharper ability to see what's going on. Okay. Now here we have Saturn. I've just picked a number of images. I haven't even compiled my favorite images from Hubble because that would take far too long. But the idea of having the telescope in space is that we can have sharper images because you don't have the atmosphere blurring or causing the twinkling that you see. I know a lot of people like to see the stars twinkle. Astronomers, we're not big fans of that. So we want sharper images, less twinkling. And this is a beautiful image of Saturn from the Hubble telescope. This is a fairly recent release. But just showing you that we can still keep our eye on things in our own solar system. We're not done understanding the solar system. We have a lot of things that we want to understand ourselves. Okay. Second here. Just want to get my sharing straightened out here. All right. Now, one of the things about Hubble is that it looks all sorts of wonderful things. Maybe some of you have screen captures of some of the images, on your computer. We can see stars in such beautiful detail. This is a star cluster in our own Milky Way, hundreds of thousands of stars, and you can see the beautiful colors. Some of the bright red stars in this globular cluster and some of the bluer ones as well in the field. But it's the sharpness of the images that we can get with Hubble. Things like exploded stars. This is a favorite image of a lot of people. Okay, a lot of the Crab Nebula. It's a beautiful image. A star that exploded. We saw it explode almost 1,000 years ago. Another nebula and a star cluster located in a little galaxy nearby to us. Okay. Sorry, having some issues here. My apologies. But I'm a big fan of galaxies. Galaxies are what I study, and you can't go wrong with showing pictures of galaxies. As a matter of fact, this is the same image I use as my backdrop. This sort of image really conjures up what you can do with the Hubble telescope you can't do with telescopes on the ground. And that is the detail, the ability to see this spiral, this barred spiral galaxy with hundreds of billions of stars in it. And if these galaxies are close enough, we can actually see the individual stars with the Hubble Space Telescope, which is really quite amazing. And it helps us understand these things in much greater detail. Now, for a lot of people, you just look at it and go, I like that image. And this actually, if I had the top 10 of Hubble images, this would be one of them. This would be another one. Beautiful spiral galaxy. This one is a galaxy that probably looks a lot like the Milky Way. It's called M83. And you can see a lot of pink in this picture. And these are star clouds, okay? Star formation regions, pink nebulae, very much like the Orion Nebula, which is something that you can see out in the sky with a pair of binoculars. Well, these pink objects are nebulae in this galaxy far, far away. But we also look at other things. Those of us at Youngstown State University, we actually use the Hubble telescope for a lot of our research. This is an image from one of the projects that I happen to be involved with. And this is basically a galactic train wreck. This is a look at 4 galaxies, 1, 2, 3, and over here, 4 galaxies that recently had a pileup. And what we're interested with Hubble is we can see this stuff in between is some of the debris from the collision. It's sort of like a demolition derby, and we're trying to recreate what happened by looking at all the parts, that are left after the demolition derby is over. But with the power of Hubble, we can see great detail and things that happen when galaxies run into one another. This is a montage of galaxies that run into one another. These are called colliding or merging galaxies. And social distancing is right out the window here. These are galaxies that got too close to one another, and the mutual gravity of each galaxy pulled on each other and started distorting the shapes. The stars go into different orbits, and you get really wild shapes. You could actually go to somebody and say, well, what does that look like to you? And you can get all sorts of interesting answers. Now, some of you might have some interesting ideas on your own. But this is a montage of Hubble Space Telescope images colliding galaxies. Some of the people I follow on Twitter are, they're taking images like this and posting them immediately on Twitter. And I'm going, oh, I like that one. Oh, that's kind of neat. And it really is kind of an interesting thing. But these galaxies are all nearby. You can sort of see the spiral arms or the carnage that's going on. But we can also look at galaxies even further away. This is what's called a galaxy cluster. This is an example of thousands of galaxies all together in an area of space being held together by gravity. Okay? Anything you see in this picture that's fuzzy is a big, big galaxy. At the bottom left here, I don't know if it's showing up, but I put a little image of what we think the Milky Way looks like at the bottom, just for sense of scale. So we think of our Milky Way as a big galaxy, and it is. But there are even bigger galaxies. Galaxies out here, football-shaped galaxies that are 10 times bigger than the Milky Way. So these are some rather impressive things out there in the universe. And we even see these weird arcs. Okay? And this is an artifact of Einstein's theory of general relativity. The bending of light by masses. These are actually distorted image of galaxies that are far in the background, but their light has been distorted and their shapes are so distorted. So by the time the light gets here, it just looks like an arc. But the things that we're able to learn about the universe and the power of the Hubble telescope allows us to study these things in great detail. And finally, I just want to end with one of the most famous images from Hubble. This is called the Ultra Deep Field. This is an image of a fairly empty plot of sky in the southern hemisphere. And in this image, almost everything you see in this picture is a galaxy very far away. And even with Hubble, even with the power of the Hubble telescope, some galaxies just like mere dots. Okay, so but it still allows us to peer further and further back in time as we see galaxies that are so far away. The light has taken billions of years to get from there to here. We can now study it in glorious detail. So that's the beauty of the Hubble telescope. I just wanted to end off with a little bit of that. It was launched, the actual launch date is about 20 days from now. That will be its actual 30th anniversary. You'll probably be hearing more about it in the news as we move forward. So just wanted to sort of give that information to everybody. And, in addition with what Curt said about telescopes, is how we use some of the big ones to unlock the mysteries of the universe and add to that some of the most beautiful images ever taken, I think, in science, not just astronomy, but I'm biased.
All right. Thank you, Pat. We have just a couple minutes left, but we did have a couple questions. Let's see. Jenny answered Mill's question, what's replacing the Hubble? There's talk of the James Webb Telescope. It's not a perfect replacement, but it's going to be really, really cool. The other question was, when galaxies collide, this is by Dylan, when galaxies collide, is it possible to predict how many stars collide within them? Do stars collide frequently when this happens, or is everything too far apart for it to be common?
Excellent question. Even though galaxies have hundreds of billions of stars, there's still lots of space between the stars. So if two galaxies collide head on, the number of stars that would physically collide is probably a handful. So out of hundreds of billions of stars, a handful. So very few of them would actually collide because there is a lot of space between the stars in a galaxy. To give you a sense of how far apart stars are on average, if you could say the sun was a basketball here in Youngstown, The next nearest star is Alpha Centauri, and it would be a basketball in Los Angeles. So that's a scale model, but there's a lot of space. So the stars won't collide. They just get thrown into different orbits, and that's why you get these wild-looking galaxy collisions. But an excellent, excellent question.
Wow, great answer too. Thank you, Pat. And thank you guys so much for coming out. This is going to wrap up our show, but we will continue discussion in the comments. I'll make sure to address questions, and please let us know if you like this kind of content. If you have any suggestions on something you'd like to see in the future. You know, we want to continue engaging you guys and connecting with you all, and we're still learning, just like everyone else. We're trying to figure out the best way to do that. So let us know in the comments, and otherwise have a wonderful evening, and remember, keep looking up.
May I add something, Tiffany?
Sure.
We're really, really sad that we lost the last part of our public show season at the Beecher Planetarium. Tiffany and I are working on putting together our season for next fall, but depending when all this shelter-in-place stuff goes out, we've already discussed we are going to try to run some summer shows if this current situation allows. So when we figure out when all this is going to end, look for more information on public shows back at the Beecher Planetarium.
Absolutely. We have not made any decisions yet. We are waiting because public safety is the forefront of our concerns, as with everyone else. So we might do something in the summer if we can, but if we can't, then we can't. But we will continue to reach out to you guys. Thank you so much for coming, and have a good evening.